Welcome back to the Journeyman for another edition of Punch Talk on the Porch. That's right, it's the boxing show I've made up while my daughter sleeps inside, very gently I might add. Episode 3 today. I want to sort of indulge in something that's pretty close to home and talk about the Australian boxers really flying the flag on the global scene. It's a pretty exciting time at the moment down under for the sport. A sport really domestically that doesn't really have the appeal of the big team sports in our Indigenous codes in the AFL and the NRL, but it's still hasn't translated to our appeal in the global scheme of things, where we're really it's really been a big boom period for the sport, I guess. So just I sort of wanted to do this video last week, but with a few things coming up family wise. About a COVID as well on my part, I sort of didn't get the chance, but we're just sort of fresh off the Riyadh season show where we had Atul Beterbiev beat Dimitri Bivol in a very close main event. But on that undercard, there was probably the pound for pound best fighters Australia's got in the male and female ranks in Skye Opetaia, who was clinical against Jack Massey. Hardly wore a punch and really stalked and bashed up his rival. And then before that we had Skye Nicolson doing Skye Nicolson things and outpointing Raven Chapman. Both getting a really big shine and a really big showing on that card. We flash forward this week, we've got Tim Tszyu main eventing over in the US in hurricane season in Florida, but still managing to main event against Murtazaliev for the IBF Super Welterweight title. So really exciting times for the sport down here, and I guess the big thing that I really wanted to touch on today is just the fact that I guess Australia is not just taking part anymore on the world stage. They're actually starting to take over and have a big say in the divisions that these fighters are in. To borrow a sort of a term from pro wrestling, they're not so much transitional champions anymore. I guess people sort of saw Jeff Horn in that regard. He got the win over Pacquiao, but he wasn't going to hang on the world stage and keep that title. And eventually we saw that when Crawford moved up and took the title from him in a pretty tough fight for Terence. I might be biased and big fan of the Hornet here, but we're not sort of seen in that mould anymore. I just mentioned Skye Opetaia, another defence of his IBF title that he's finally won back after the politics of the sport sort of took it away. But he's beaten Maris Breedis twice, and he's looking for those big unification bouts. He wants the Chris Billum Smiths of the world, and obviously he's got the fight with Zerto coming up, Zerto Ramirez, the WBA champion, but he wants these unification bouts. He wants to rule these divisions. And Tim Tszyu's of the same ilk. He had that close loss to Sebastian Fundora earlier this year, where I think if he hadn't have been cut, things would have ended a lot differently. Easy for me to say I wasn't in the ring that night, and it was an absolute war either way. But Tim Tszyu's sort of one of the biggest talking points in that division at the moment. He's not Tim Tszyu anymore, as Jamel Charlo sort of called him. He's Tim Mother Effin Tszyu, as he likes to say. So he's really taking over in that space, and obviously he's got the media support behind him and a big following here in Australia with the Fox Sports side of things, but also in terms of mainstream popularity, which was built smartly. If you ask me, they've done a really good job with him. But he's really starting to be a huge player in that division, and even talking about fighting others in higher weight classes, which would be exciting if it ever eventuates. But you've got those two, and then conversely, it was sort of a bit left field when it got announced, but Liahm now fighting Richardson Hitchens in Puerto Rico. I guess they're capitalising on Paro's sort of popularity in that country, I guess, if you call it popularity, going in there and beating Subriel Matias a few months ago. But yeah, another fight where he's not just sort of saying it as, he beat the boogeyman, but he'll have that belt short term. Like his promoter in Eddie Hearn and obviously Angelo Di Carlo and the Ace Boxing Group still have a fair say in things, I'd assume. But they're talking about Liahm unifying in that division, actually being a big player. He wants wants the Devon Haneys, he wants the Teofimo Lopez's, he wants all these big players. You know, Australia's not just taking part with the biggest stars in the world. You know, that they're an active participant in that division, but also a big key player. You know, so there's also that's set for December 7, and then a few weeks later, Sam Goodwin's going to be fighting Naoya Inoue in Japan for. I don't know necessarily if contracts have been signed, but it's almost looking like they're a guarantee for all 4 belts at super bantamweight. You know, so looking at that, you know, probably our top 4 pound for pound fighters in Australia are all being, you know, playing a big role in the say of their division. They're not just bit part players for the big stars over in the US like it sort of has been in the past. It's actually sort of grown to a stage where, you know, they're not going to lay down or go out easy. They're going to be, you know, potentially beating these guys, which is such an exciting thing for the fans of the sport. And I guess the big thing out of that is our 3 biggest promoters down here in Australia. You know, it's sort of Ace Boxing Group, and they've obviously branched out with the Premier Boxing Series, and they're working with other promoters and in that space. But you know, they've got their biggest stars. Obviously, their biggest fighter is Liam Paro, and like we just mentioned in an outline there, you know, he's a huge player in that 140 pound division, which is sort of catapulted into big things on the back of that Josh Taylor undisputed run. You know, and then a subsequent loss to Teofimo Lopez. But you know, it's such an exciting time for Liam in that mix. But Ace, you know, he's their biggest fighter. And then if you look sideways to Tasman, who have Jai Opetaia, who's sort of in partnership with Matchroom, and I guess Matchroom are doing a bit more of the legwork now, but they built Jai to the point where he was able to go and fight Maurice Breedis, you know, and cause what was seen in the books as a huge upset. I think I remember at the time I didn't necessarily go out and outright pick Jai, but I knew we could definitely do it. Because we saw him on the Australian scene beat the best we had, you know, dummied such a horrible word for a guy as tough as Mark Flanagan, but you know, he's a world title challenger that Jai really took apart inside the distance, you know, so we saw Jai and we knew what he could do, but the fact that they built him to that stage and then he's over with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn now is just incredibly exciting. And then obviously our probably most popular promoter in No Limit with the Foxtel side of things, you know, they've got Tim Tszyu and Sam Goodwin in their stable, who are going, like we just outlined, going to go fight huge fights in their division and really have a say in taking their divisions to another level. So it's such an exciting time. But there's also, if you look down the line and you look at our sort of second tier of fighters now, I'd class Jason Maloney probably the 5th fighter in that top 5 pound for pound in terms of men's. But you know, it's sort of come out of, even in the loss to Yoshiki Takai earlier this year, that he's, you know, a megastar in Japan. You know, they love him in terms of their boxing fandom over there. You know, they think he really sort of typifies that culture, which is, you know, you go out and fight your heart out and you display your skills, and if you lose graciously. If you win humbly. You know, and Jason's been a class act for such a long time on these shores, in terms of the way he's conducted himself. So, I mean, he's a megastar in Japan, and people know him from the huge bouts that he's had. Obviously, he had a Fight of the Year contender with Saul Sanchez earlier this year, but he fought gallantly against Naoya Inoue, you know, in the bubble and got done. But I mean, he's not the only one who's ever done that. In fact, he fought, you know, reasonably well given the opposition, relative to the opposition that he faced, you know. But he's sort of there. But if you look down another level as well, you know, Ace Boxing Group, they're sending over Floyd Masson to Poland to fight Mateusz Masternak, easy for me to say, in what's looking like being potentially an IBF title eliminator at cruiserweight, which, funnily enough, is the belt that Jai Opetaia holds. So, you know, that'll be interesting. You know, if Jai doesn't get those opportunities to unify, you know, there's a former title challenger in Masternak there, or there's a fresh face in the ever-willing and warrior of Floyd Masson, who's a former IBO champion who had that incredible fight last year with Fabio Turchi, you know. So, you know, there's options there, but that's sort of the second tier of fighters that we have in Australia. And then Dempsey McKean, you know, he's going to be fighting on the Fury Usyk undercard, you know. Furious 2, I should say, sorry, the rematch later this year. But you know, he's technically with Matchroom, but it's part of that Ace Boxing Group Matchroom partnership that they've sort of got going there. That's really exciting. You know, he could really cash in on that opportunity, which is just phenomenal. You know, so they're sort of the second tier of fighters, and then you look sideways again to a Dana Coolwell, who's 25 and has the 2 losses, but I mean, they were both outside of the featherweight division that he campaigns at. And even then, you know, you could make the argument that he won both those fights. I tend to think, and this is just going off memory when it happened all those years ago, 3 years ago, I believe, but I thought the Wiley one, you know, I thought Jake Wiley probably got it done, but the second one, when he fought Endelucez for the youth world title up there in Brisbane, I thought he did enough to get the nod that night. So, you know, he's got great hands, he's very patient at the range, and he's very calm, but he's also quite quick and quite powerful. So, you know, he's fighting Bruce Carrington on the Mike Tyson undercard, you know, over in the States, the Mike Tyson Jake Paul card, which is going to be on Netflix. So his opportunity to shine and show his skills to an audience just increased 30-fold relative to what he's been fighting on, you know, which is so exciting to see. You know, the fighter that he's fighting in, Bruce Carrington, you know, Tszyu, I've been impressed by, but I think Dana can beat him. You know, I'm not going to say that I'm going to go out there and outright campaign and pick him, but you know, I think Tszyu's fought worse opposition and looked not necessarily great in those fights as well. So, you know, that's another exciting opportunity overseas. And then, you know, you just keep looking down the list, and each promoter, like, they're sort of, even their second tier fighters, like we just outlined, are getting these big opportunities. And this weekend as well on the Tim Tszyu undercard, you'll have Cesar Mateo Tapia, you know, who's fighting a big bout against forgive me, I've forgotten the name in the time, but I'm pretty sure it's the man who fought Isaac Hardman, the South American fellow who fought Isaac Hardman earlier this year and got the job done in Australia. I believe it's Lavedra. Yes, something along those lines. I'll have to look it up and forgive me for getting that wrong. But, you know, he's fighting a huge bout over in the States this weekend as well. You know, and he's only just recently signed to No Limit, but, you know, he's been a top prospect in Australia for so long, and you know, co-managed, I believe, by Mike Altamura. So, you know, it's very exciting for him as well to see how he's going to go. I think he's kicking off that pay-per-view card. I don't believe it's pay-per-view over in the States, but it's pay-per-view over here in Australia. So, you know, just such exciting times on the world stage for Australians, and it's not just the fact that our promoters are also bringing out, you know, top-tier talent. Obviously, I hark back to the big world title fight that Dragonfire and the Premier Boxing Series and Paradigm were able to, and Danny Green Promotions were all able to sort of come together and put that together for Alex Winwood to fight, knock out CP Freshmart. But, you know, there's been so many world titles over here as well. Obviously, Yanabek Alim Kanuli came over to Australia and you know, put on a masterclass against Andrei Mikhailovich, and then you've also had Lynn Sandstrom fighting for a world title. Just you know, Shay Keneally fought for a world title on Australian shores and won. So it's such an exciting time. It almost feels like every fortnight we've got an Australian fighting for a world title or fighting in a big international fight. So really wanted to just take 10 minutes out of my day to really reflect on that and, you know, ramble on my porch as I do. But it's such an exciting time on the world stage for Australia. You know, and even guys that I haven't mentioned here now that are sort of floating around, you know, excuse me, but you've got like the likes of Andrew Maloney, who's sort of had that fight earlier this year with Pedro Guevara, and, you know, I thought Guevara did enough to get the job done, and I didn't really necessarily have a problem with the decision, but Andrew certainly had claims for it as well. So, you know, he's sort of floating around the super flyweight categories. He would like to fight Fumalele Kafu, who just beat Kosei Tanaka over in Japan. So, you know, really, really exciting times. I guess has been the theme of this video, but, you know, it's not just the top 5 pound for pound who are going in and, you know, maybe winning a belt and just hanging on to it until the next fight comes. They're actually really taking charge of these divisions, and I think that's an incredibly special thing. And obviously I mentioned Skye Nicolson off the top, but it's also been endemic in the women's game as well. Obviously I mentioned the 2 world title fights we just had there, but in Shaker Neely and Lynn Sandstrom fighting for belts, and you know, we're winning one and not winning the next. But there's also been, you know, Chanika Johnson, you know, who come back to the world title level and beat Nina Hughes over in Perth earlier this year. So, and there's other, you know, world ranked women's fights. You know, Kay Scott's going to be fighting for a world title later this year at age 40. You know, in just a handful of professional fights. You know, so it's such an exciting time. You know, get on board if you're a boxing fan, because you know, we've got world title fights coming out of our ears, and it's not just world title fights that we're going to, you know, just show up in. It's world title fights that we're going to, you know, win and stake our claims as the best fighters in these divisions. So hop on board, enjoy the rest of the year. There's obviously going to be local shows as well. Get along to those if you can, or watch them on TV, or pay for the streaming services, you know, because, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, this is where the Jai Opetaias, this is where the Sam Goodmans, this is where the Tim Tszyu were fighting. And now they're on the world stage. And I think if professional boxing in Australia keeps developing the way it is, I think we're going to have even more names sort of throw their hat into the ring, and more promoters are going to sign these guys, more managers are going to want to get them international exposure. So, you know, get on board, enjoy the fights this weekend. It's going to be a great card. I don't necessarily know that I agree with the price point, but again, I'm a tight ass, so you know, I've just said go buy a local show, but then don't buy Tim Tszyu, which is a bit of an oxymoron. So, you know, enjoy it wherever you're watching it, and just get on board for the rest of the year, because these are fighters that need our support, but also deserve our support, because they're doing big things on the world stage. So that's where I land it. Have a great day, everyone. Subscribe, like, you know, or don't. It's up to you, but helps me out at this channel as I do these cathartic videos. And yeah, talk soon.